Good morning. How's everybody doing? We're going to talk about being gullible. I think nearly everybody on this planet is gullible. It's frustrating to watch. So let's go through a little quick chain of events or whatever. If Who rules the world right now? Let's just figure that out, okay? You could say, well, the most powerful entity is the Federal Reserve, right? They print and make the money that's the most powerful money, or have been. Okay, well, who's that? You'd say, well, that's the American government. Well, no, it's not. That's the American government tried to audit the Federal Reserve a while back, and they got laughed out of the room. They said, go pound sand. And so it ain't them, which should be scary to you, Americans, right? That should be enough right there to just wake you up and say, whoa, no, that's not how America should be done. And it shouldn't have to be a president doing it as like a single man who can be shot, like Abraham Lincoln tried, JFK tried. Then Andrew Jackson did it, but there was assassinations all around him and his vice president. But they just out-assassined the assassins. Anyhow, friggin', it has to just be all the people demanding it. Now, we're done with you. Get the fuck out of our country, and we'll pay you back your debt in due time. But until then, go back to Sweden. You got a bunch of snow bunnies. Okay, so it's not them. Who is it? Well, traditionally running it, it's been the same families that run Israel. So it's all those same people. And you can go look at the who's in the charge of it over the years, and the last names are all similar. Simon, you know what I mean? Anyhow, so then you say, okay, well, who's the leader of those people? Because they're Americans. You can't really say that they're Israelites. They don't, you know what I mean? But they do send money to Israel, and they're all in love with each other. Anyhow, so you got to go back to 1945. Who owns Israel? Who signed? Whose name's on the dotted line when it says we're giving you Israel? And you can look this up, and it's called the Balfour Agreement. You look that up, and that's the second stab in the back. Is, you know, the great stab in the back was at the end of the First World War, which actually started the Second World War, and then this was the end of the Second World War, which actually started what you guys call Israel. And it's signed by the Rothschilds. Do you get that? Do you comprehend that? And can you fit it all together? And real power doesn't show itself. It's like when you start reading the books, especially their books, you'll discover that, like, the head of the serpent, you know, And you don't even need to read their books. Their books have inspired all your comic book bad guys too. And the real bad guy, Dr. Claw doesn't show his face ever, right? Because he's Gadget's chief of police. Like that's the whole twist of Inspector Gadget. And but so you can't have he his power would be diluted if he was everywhere, right? The Rothschilds were starting to get everywhere for a brief time, just as the awakening was going on in the 2015, and then they kind of sidestepped everything. They got their big light guys to be out in the show as their front man, who y'all know, the Soroses and the Bills and the this and that, right? Like you see these guys, and all your politicians and stuff, they just pay for, but through these other people, so that it's totally hands off. And then they split their fortune up through inheritances early or whatever, so that none of them seem to be trillionaires or anything, right? They're all just billionaires. It's like 50 or 52 of them or something like that. And they're all stupid rich. And I'm sure that, all the money's controlled by like the same, thought process. And then you got like your BlackRock CEOs and stuff like that. All the same families, right? So, and then you got these Christians that are like, well, we have to stand beside Israel. Why? Why would you have to stand beside Israel? Well, because that's where our Bible came from. Okay. They removed 14 books from your Bible and tell you not to read them. And then you get brainwashed at seminary school first. Your pastor gets brainwashed, and then he brainwashes you into thinking that was a good thing. And all these people are like, well, yeah, of course, God worked it out from the front to the end, and he knew everything that was going to happen and this and that. God, yeah, exactly. So he put Satan here in order to weed out the weak souls. And gave him lots of leeway in order to see who actually has faith and who doesn't, right? So yeah, you're all he's gonna remove those books. And see, God just tells you subtly. He says, my people in the end days die for a lack of knowledge. They suffer for a lack of knowledge. And he says, make sure that you always look at both sides of every story. Only a fool makes his mind up. Only a fool makes up his mind with anyway, whatever. I forget the quote. But the Bible literally calls you a fool if you don't look at both sides of every story. And that's obvious. Like I've always said, if you see two people breaking up, and the girl comes and tells you her story, and then the guy comes and tells you his story, you know that the truth's somewhere in the middle, or maybe one of them's a little more honest than the other, but they're both going to have biases. I'm going to leave things out, and then, if you knew both stories, you could actually kind of bring up a little bit of the points from the other side in a new light, and help them to understand on both sides the other side, and you can bring compromise back to the relationship by just calmly explaining things differently to each party and getting them to just kind of see from the other side, from the other person's perspective. That was a total tangent. Anyway, that was something that I learned when I was hosting the parties as a kid. When couples would get into fights, I would just talk to both sides. I could settle most of them out, unless they were bad couples. Like teenagers and shit like that, who just were together briefly, you know. Lost my train. Way off the track. So, anyhow, the gullibility of this world is insane. And these are just the little things, see? So, what I was talking about was God tells us to go seek those books. And to even look at the ones that on the other side. See, now, if you were to just do the Jewish books, just be that smart. My thought is you should start with the book of, well, the Bible, obviously. Get saved through Jesus, and that, you know, the Bible has everything in it in order for you to get saved, mostly. But it doesn't have enough in it for you to have true faith, number one, or true understanding, number two, right? And without those, when the Antichrist comes and all that, you're going to fall away. And the devil's here to get you to, openly, like on both sides. God says to him, not in the Bible, of course, because Satan doesn't want you to know the details about Satan. So all the books that detail him too much have been removed. And then they say, oh, well, you guys don't need these books. They're not really the Christian part. You know, the Old Testament stuff, and it's this and that, and you got enough to get, with your your Torah, you got enough to get and no, you don't. Not even close. Anyhow, those books would explain to you who Edom is. And the first book that you should start with is the book of demonology, because it warns you and teaches you how to recognize and then avoid witchcraft and demons, and how to see them quickly, identify them, and know what actions to take to keep them away from you, because you're protected under Jesus. You don't have to worry about them, but they can leech onto you, number one, and they'll suck your energy, and therefore stop you from having the energy that you need to be with God, and or they can hook onto you and kind of pull you back to your old self and into carnal, sinful things. So, excuse me. So you gotta be careful about that shit. So that book really helps with all kinds of stuff like that. And then when you're reading the Jewish books, see, the Bible tells you there's a false Jew. And then when Jesus is yelling at them, he tells you who they are. When he's flipping over the tables and stuff like that, and he refers to them killing saints, certain saints, and then they answer in the affirmative, but say that it wasn't us, it was our great grandparents that did that, and it was before we were converted, kind of thing. Which, and they didn't say those exact words, but that was kind of the implication if you know all the writings. But if you don't know all the writings, then you're not going to get that implication. It's just going to go right over your head, where it's just a quick response to an argument where the Jews were like, no, that wasn't us. And it wasn't the Jews that did that. It was the Edomites that did that before they were converted to Jews. That's what they're referring to. Jesus is saying, I know who you are. You're not Jewish. You're Edomites. You're false, fake, and so stop exploiting Judaism and making it all about money and stuff like this. You're the reason that I have to come down here and clear up all the laws. You bunch of hypocrites. And they were exploiting every law and breaking it down to the finest little details and making everybody into a great sinner in order to exploit more money out of them. And that's part of the reason that Jesus had to come down here and straighten all the laws out. There's more to it. Obviously, he had to die for our sins, but he had to reiterate and simplify the laws and just be like, no, don't listen to these people. Here's what matters, and that's why everybody gets bogged down in this, I just got to be a good person and I'm good to go. You got to be a good person and believe in Jesus and the resurrection, the birth, the death, burial, resurrection. And then start being a good person. Now, that was explained very clearly by, let's say, your bank account had negative 1 million, right? Because you've had this lifetime of little sins, and there's so many sins, right? Like the thinking adulterous thoughts, there's sin. Every time that you've thought about, look at that sexy whatever, thinking violent thoughts, not just doing violence, but then even if you've punched a hole in the wall or anything like that, like that's all sin, because you're losing control of yourself, lashing out and being an idiot. And then bigger sins, if you cheated on somebody, or if every time you get loaded drunk and you start shooting your mouth off about stuff, it's not what goes in, it's what comes out. So if you're drunk and you start punching people or yelling at people or arguing with people or sleeping around with people, well, that's all things that are just pouring out of you that are all sins, right? So you got all this bank account of sin all saved up, and then you keep adding to it. Every time you tell a little lies or whatever, you're constantly just more, a little more, and so you can do all kinds of good works. It's not really scratching down at that balance. Do you know what I mean? You might be able to cancel out your new sin going in, maybe, if you're a really good Christian, but you're not, or a Jewish person, say, but you're not actually doing enough to reduce that balance. So then you go to Jesus And he says, well, I'll adopt you. And, and you say, okay, you know, you learn about him, and then you learn about his life, and you learn about his death, and then you learn about his resurrection. And eventually, one way or another, it will hit you that you believe it all. That once you study enough, you'll finally be like, okay, no, this is the real deal. It wasn't hokey pokey magic. None of that shit. This was something. And so then that's when Jesus comes in and he says, all right, my adopted son, how's your bank account? And he looks at it, and it's negative, couple million, and says, okay, well, let's pay that off. And here's my bank accounts that I'm going to link into yours. So here's, 10 million in your account, and in positive balance, because now you're me, basically. Here's your new robes and stuff. Go start a new life. Become a new person and represent me, your father. And then that's when you can go out and try to do some works. And now you've got this account to hold against you, or to hold anything that any of your little screw ups that you still do as a Christian, because we still do screw up, right? And but you got this new happiness and this Holy Ghost, and this new outlook on the world, and a new outlook on life, and especially on the world, and the universe, and the whole creation is something else than what we were taught, and what you thought before, and everything is testifying to him. Everything you look at, and all the beautiful things that you get to see, and it's all here just to show you. Um, but anyway, most of us don't see it. I can't believe how little people see. They still don't see the corruption in the politics. It's enough to give me a twitch in my eye. Sorry. Anyway, the political atmosphere, they're all bought and paid for, both sides, and they're working in tangent to lead us down this path. We need to get pissed off and actually fire these people. We don't need wars and all this other no. You're all fired. You scummy, greedy, gross people. You know who you are. Don't run. Because we know you're a flight risk. And you know who you are. You just stay where you are. We're coming for you. We're arresting you. And we're prosecuting you. All your bank accounts are going to be shut down and everything immediately. And you're going to be treated like the truckers in Canada were, or like the parents in America were. And rightfully so, instead of being falsely accused of being a terrorist. And once we start doing that, it would be a start to the change. But it's not really what's going to do it. Because in order to defeat Edom, you need Israel. It's crucial. They're the only two. It's one or the other. One's going to be up, the other's going to be down. Um, and then Jacob got the blessing that the dew of the earth was going to yield to him, and the dew of the earth will yield to him. Where Esau got the blessing that you'll live in the dew of the earth by your sword. So all that Jacob has to do is wake up. And it's like a coma dream where they say, wake up, wake up, wake up. We need to start doing that. We need to all wake up to who Jacob is, who Israel is, and really start driving it at them. So when these people say, Native American, man, and you guys got to get out of our country, this and that, you got to say, no. There's no such thing as a Native American. That doesn't make any sense. I've read my Bible. There was only 8 people that got off of the ark. So your people got off of that ark somewhere in Europe. And then we found the walking trails. They're just underwater. So you guys migrated here. Well, we lost 10 tribes of Israel, which is hundreds of thousands of people. We just lost them. Where'd they go? Duh. We didn't fucking lose them. We pushed them out of Europe and into Alaska. And all thoughts would be that they would have froze to death and died, but all of America was there. And South America was there. So they were able to go ahead and populate. And like I said, a few dams let go, like the Grand Canyon and this and that, and raised the oceans up, exposed a whole bunch of new land, and they got to live quite happily over here for a long time. But they need to wake up to who they really are and go home. And then when people say that they're African Americans, right? Well, the 2 tribes of Jacob, we didn't lose them. They were never lost. They got pushed down through Africa, and the Africans who dance naked around fires hated the people of Israel who wore clothes and built buildings and created cities and did math and shit like this and had this complicated language. And but the Israelites would also, I'm sure, grab these people from around the fires and be like, oh, beautiful savage woman, I'm taking her as one of my slave girls, and I'm gonna, she'll have all kinds of kids for me. And so Jacob got darker and darker, and Israel went through Japan last and up that coast, China, Japan area. So they did the same thing there, but with those beautiful little girls, and then took them over with them. And I'm sure that there was probably already Japanese people here in the States and in Canada, because they would have already been coming across that trail, you know what I mean? So Israel would have just followed them. Like it's probably native Japan's land, if you wanted to be about who was actually here first. You'd have to give all of North America to Japan, And especially as you got further down into like Mexico and stuff like that, that'd be way more Japanese. So, anyways, I'm out of time, so I'm gonna have to go. Like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Try to talk about this more later, but the long and short of it is, read books, listen to books on tape, look at the books that they tell you not to read. If they tell you that you shouldn't read a book, and it's an educational book or a biblical book or a scholarly book, read it. It's a good indication that they're hiding something from you in that book, and that you'll get a really good understanding from it. And it'll open up your whole mind and strengthen your faith in the Most High and in His Word and in His Bible. And then you can go back to your Bible and be like, oh shit, yeah, now I know who that is. And oh shit, now I know who that is too. And it's not just the king of the north and the king of the south. Like, I know who their general was, and why he did what he did, and how they became the kings, and who their bloodline was, and all this kind of stuff. You know? Now I know who Herod is, and who his bloodline is, and where it all came from, and why that he hated babies for all those times and all that stuff, and why he had that psychological snapping in his brain with, he killed his own kids and he strangled them to death, a couple of them. He was always scared that, because he was an Edomite, that and he was ruling over Israel, so he was always scared that he was going to be overthrown by an Israelite. And it could have been anybody, because they all stood more reason to be king than he did, because he didn't have any blood in him to be king. It was only through Rome, but then he attached himself to Rome more, and then he named his kids all Herod. So that's how it seems like he was alive for hundreds of years or whatever, you know, because there's at least two of them that called themselves Herod. Anyway, so yeah, go out and read and educate yourselves, guys. Don't be gullible. Don't believe everything you see and read and hear. Wars and rumors of wars. So what the word rumor means is fake wars, being told about wars that aren't really happening, or aren't really as big as they are. So be careful about what you believe. Know that all those people that you see on TV are a bunch of liars. It's their job. They lie to you. God bless.